BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Thursday, and on Thursdays last year, I did a regular segment about the disappearance of Donna Lass from 1970, and in December of last year, I decided to conclude that series, and I more or less did an announcement saying that Mike Morford, who hosts the Criminology podcast as well as Zodiac Speaking and is involved with many media projects, was going to do an interview with the former roommate of Donna Lass, and that was more or less my send-off. And I said I was going to launch something called the Versus series, which normally comes out on Thursdays this year, where I talk about two different events in the true crime world, and a psychological comparing and contrasting, if you will. But we had a comment come in from Lost Canyon who said, "Did you listen to the This is the Zodiac Speaking podcast? They did an interview recently with a friend of Donna Lass, left much to be desired but interesting nonetheless." And when I read that comment, I thought, I never actually did a full response to the interview that Mike Morford did with Donna Lass's former friend. I only say former because Donna Lass disappeared, and her name is Joanne Getchie, and she is featured in the episode Deep Dive into the Donna Lass Case. And I heard it on the show Zodiac Speaking, but when Morph originally talked to me about this episode, I thought he was going to release it on a different platform, but I heard it on Zodiac Speaking, and I always get that podcast from Google. I just put it into the Google search bar, and it sends me directly to the show, and sometimes I can even listen through the Google platform. But before we truly begin, I would like to remind you guys that I am also the host of Astro Psych 400, a different program here on YouTube. Astro Psych 400 is another channel that I run, and some people are saying that they use BlackBoxOnlineRadio as a way to fall asleep at night. But I thought, why not create something that is not true crime related, but specifically designed to help people fall asleep? And you can hear that podcast for sleep on Astro Psych 400. Say goodbye to insomnia and hello to Astro Psych. And of course, a great way to help out this channel is to go over to Amazon.com and look at the book Killer on a White Horse by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel murder mystery inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the Teespring page. Feel free to have a look at some of the merchandise, and remember, being weird is not a crime. Now, Donna Lass disappeared on September 6th of 1970, and what happened to her is still a mystery to this day. Some people think that she was abducted by an opportunistic predator, and other people think that she was abducted and murdered by the Zodiac Killer. And when I was listening to Morse's interview with Joanne Getchie, and I did go back and listen just prior to this recording, again, to truly get some clarity, I noticed a very big discrepancy between the testimony of Joanne Getchie and what has been shared all throughout the internet. And what I heard was that Joanne said that Donna Lass was working in the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino doing the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, and that was something that she was very adamant about, that Donna Lass got off work at 11 p.m. And if you read about the Donna Lass case online, almost every single source will say that she was working the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, and she was working in the nurses' station because Donna and Joanne actually met in nurses' training. Joanne was a nurse as well. But I think that would drastically throw off the timeline if it was true that Donna Lass would have been working the 3 p.m. to 11 a.m. shift. But Mike Morford even revealed that the source for the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift was from a police report, and it has been more than 50 years since Joanne Getchie and Donna Lass had any type of conversations or ability to share information. Although if someone is involved with a high-profile disappearance, I mean Joanne, that is, if her friend had gone missing, those aren't details that I would expect too many people would forget. I mean, that's another aspect of memory. I was talking about this last week on the Anything Goes Friday about how memory can be affected over time, but if your friend has gone missing, and not only someone who has gone missing, but by Joanne Getchie's own admission, the disappearance of Donna Lass even made the papers, including the San Francisco Chronicle. But I'm still forced to go with the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. timeline, meaning that Donna Lass would have walked to work at 6 p.m. just prior to her shift, which would have started at 6 p.m., I should say, leaving the Monte Verdi apartment complex on Pioneer Trail Road, and would have completed her shift at 2 a.m. And the reason why this has been somewhat documented is Donna Lass was supposed to have entered an entry into the logbook at the nurse's station at 1:45 or just after 1:40 a.m., and it was incomplete. I've never seen a copy of this logbook. I've never seen anyone to confirm this, but the legend, I repeat, the legend is that the pen even trailed off the page like she was interrupted when she was supposed to be completing the entry, and that's why I began to think that she was abducted perhaps at 1:45 a.m. thereabouts, if she were indeed abducted. But it really is quite difficult to make out all of the details. But what we did learn from the interview with Joanne Getchie was that, firstly, Donna Lass did indeed have connections to Santa Barbara, California, and when I was on the Professor Dad channel with Drew and Ross and of course, Professor Horan, they were discussing this. Did Donna Lass have connections to Santa Barbara? And it completely slipped my mind that, yes, Joanne Getchie did indeed say that Donna Lass had been in Santa Barbara, and the first person that Donna Lass lived with was a nurse in Santa Barbara, and that's how they knew each other. Donna Lass disappeared on September 6th, 1970. But she arrived in the South Lake Tahoe region on June 6th of 1970, and she spent the summer in a room for rent that was owned by a couple, and the wife was someone who had been a nurse in Santa Barbara, California. Now, someone like Howard Davis likes to really try to connect Donna Lass and his Zodiac suspect, Bruce Davis, stating firstly that Bruce Davis had connections to Santa Barbara and South Lake Tahoe, and that even after Manson's helter-skelter, Bruce Davis, who was Charles Manson's right-hand man, was involved with Donna Lass in some way, and that they may have even dated. I don't believe any of those claims, mind you, but it just goes to show that people could be in different places at different times, especially Santa Barbara and South Lake Tahoe. Howard Davis is, of course, the author of the Zodiac Manson connection. But I also thought it was rather fascinating that Joanne Getchie said that Donna Lass was from South Dakota, and Joanne herself was also from South Dakota, and they both ended up in San Francisco, and they were roommates in San Francisco when they were working at Letterman General Hospital. And she said that she didn't actually spend a lot of time with Donna Lass because they worked shifts at opposite hours. So while one person is going into work, another person is asleep and so on, and it's just never really coinciding. But Mike Morford did point out a way in which the police reports can be wrong, because so many details that people have to examine cases come from the police reports, the case file, but he said in the police report, Joanne Getchie went to visit Donna Lass on September 7th, 1970. That's the day after her disappearance, and that she brought a friend with her on that trip, but Joanne Getchie says very clearly that she went alone to see Donna Lass on September 7th, 1970. And I'm noticing something else that seems rather odd, though, because on the one hand, I think that Joanne Getchie did indeed travel alone, but if you're going to meet up with somebody, you guys in the comments section were pointing this out all the time, saying, who on earth would meet somebody at 2 a.m.? I mean, firstly, go to work and then drive 4 hours and meet up with somebody at 2 a.m. and just like, hey, how's it going? You ready to party and so on? No, that seems like it would be definitely more consistent with the 11 p.m. ending of the shift, which would have been on September 5th of 1970. And Joanne says very clearly in the interview that she worked, and she left work and then drove 4 hours to South Lake Tahoe. Really, it's State Line, Nevada. I mean, the South Lake Tahoe region. And that was the plan, that she was going to meet up with Donna Lass. That seems more consistent with the 11 p.m. one. But now, is it possible that Donna Lass worked the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift on September 5th and 6th, and then on September 6th she was scheduled again to do 3 p.m. to 11 p.m.? I guess that is possible. I mean, that would solve all of the discrepancies. But I think the bigger issue is just the media, newspapers, and now these electronic sources where all the reports have been uploaded are just horribly inconsistent in the Donna Lass case. But another reason why I still stand by this 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. timeline is Donna Lass was reported to have been a gambler, and Joanne said very clearly in the interview that she did with Mike Morford that was one of the reasons why Donna Lass chose to move to State Line, Nevada in the South Lake Tahoe region. Really, her apartment complex is in present-day South Lake Tahoe, California. Her place of employment would have been the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, where she would have worked as a nurse at the first aid station. But Joanne also described the first aid station there as an office. She even said when she was arriving, she was expected to just ask somebody, where's the nurse's office? So it's a little bit more than just an open air place. It definitely would have been treated like an office at the end of a hallway. Well, when I was reading Ray Grant's Zodiac Killer Solved, he is the author of that book, he said, and I do believe that he has drawn a lot from the police reports in that book, because everything else was consistent with a lot of other sources, that Donna Lass firstly moves there on June 6th of 1970. She stays in the room for rent, and she had only briefly moved in to the Monte Verdi apartment complex on Pioneer Trail. But what Ray Grant wrote in the book was something that truly attracted Donna to the area was her love of the outdoors. She just wanted to be in the Lake Tahoe region, and also working at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino. She was practically her own boss. She wasn't heavily supervised working as a nurse in the casino. Joanne Getchie added an additional reason that would have brought Donna Lass to Lake Tahoe, and that is that she would have, she was very much into gambling, and she wanted to work in the casino, and something that Mike Morford had shared with me when I interviewed him for the Zodiac Killer Channel's Interview with the Experts series. I'm also the host of that program. Is that Donna Lass was afraid of the dark. She didn't like walking around at night. And Mike Morford asked Joanne Getchie very, very clearly, is there any way that Donna Lass would have walked home at night, like at 2 a.m. in the dark? Would she have made a 16-minute walk from the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino to her apartment complex? And Joanne's response was no. She's just like, that's not what would have happened. And I can truly follow that. But again, that supports a 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. timeline. I mean, I can definitely comprehend how somebody is going to be spending 3 or 4 hours at the tables in the casino gambling, as opposed to spending perhaps, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., spending 6 hours, maybe 7 hours, just sitting around gambling and such. I mean, I get it that it is somewhat of an addictive activity, but 7 hours, I also think that might be incorrect. But a very simple thing, and that could solve everything, is just she worked the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift on September 5th into September 6th, and disappeared on September 6th, and then did the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift on September 7th. But that is just some type of wild guess. I'm just trying to connect some dots, which is what I shouldn't do, because that is definitely deviating from the facts. But I just thought it was very odd that Joanne Geshe was so adamant that Donna Lass was working the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. An additional piece of info about the Sahara Tahoe is, when I talked about the disappearance of Bryn Rainey from 1977, she disappeared before her 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. shift at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino. And, I mean, if anything, that shows that this is something that Sahara Tahoe employees regularly did. They would work the shifts that would go from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., that is consistent. And with Bryn Rainey, she would frequent bars before her shift because it's late, they're some of the only things open, and she was murdered by somebody named Joseph Holt, and DNA ended up linking him to her death. But I believe at that time Joseph Holt had already passed away. I think he had been dead for 4 years by the time they identified him as the perpetrator, but don't quote me on that one, please. And finally, perhaps one of the biggest questions, was Donna Lass a victim of the Zodiac killer? Now, if it is true that the Zodiac was involved with Donna Lass, this would be one of the largest deviations from any type of even a remote pattern in the Zodiac's activities. Because as I said very clearly on a recent episode, I viewed the Zodiac as a coward, and I even talked about this with Mike Morford in that interview that I was citing, where the Zodiac would sneak up on someone and attack people who were in a defenseless state. Going into someone's place of employment and abducting them, that definitely seems like something that is too bold and too risky for the Zodiac, who would just want to hide in the shadows, sneak up on some people and fire some gunshots and run away. I mean, the Zodiac was a very inconsistent serial killer, or whatever the solution to the mystery is. I've always been very much opposed to the Zodiac connection to the disappearance of Donna Lass, but I did notice that Mike Morford asked Joanne Getchie about a connection to Chico, California, and I almost certainly think that he was trying to ask if his suspect, McDuff, was connected to Donna Lass in some way. Did she have any type of connection to McDuff? And I guess we're still only referring to him by that. He's also been referred to online as Suspect Mason, but Mike Morford released a new suspect last year, or perhaps he has identified someone who could possibly be the Zodiac killer, and I have a couple episodes talking about him. At the end of my Donna Lass series, though, Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com did contact me, and he wanted to share something about Donna Lass and a different Zodiac killer suspect, and that was Richard Gaikowski, because Gaikowski, of course, was famously from South Dakota, Watertown, South Dakota, and I've always said Watertown, San Diego. Anytime I see that SD, I think San Diego, but no, that is the abbreviation for South Dakota. And both Joanne Getchie and Donna Lass were from South Dakota. Joanne and Donna's family were still in South Dakota at the time of the disappearance. And I believe that Donna Lass was from Beresford, South Dakota. And the thing that Tom Voigt was sharing with me is that Gaikowski had once mailed an item from Beresford, South Dakota. But the reason why people believe that there is a Zodiac killer connection to the disappearance of Donna Lass is because of a couple of pieces of writing that were mailed in. A card that has some connection to Lake Tahoe, firstly, and another one that says St. Donna, which came, I want to say, 4 years later, and talks about peeking through the pines. Okay, the first one also talks about peeking through the pines, and then the second one features something that is similar to the pines. But the first Zodiac card that is trying to have any connection at all to Lake Tahoe doesn't say Donna Lass, it doesn't say something about the girl, it doesn't say something about anything that could have happened to Donna. And I want to say, was it the Thin Air podcast that said something about how, okay, that card is mailed, and then the authorities were the ones who began thinking about it, and they're like, well, who could this possibly be referring to? Well, why not Donna Lass? because they thought that she was someone who disappeared from the Lake Tahoe region, and there were some, she fit possibly a Zodiac killer crime, but that's all just created in their own minds. Another thing, though, that I think would also support the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. timeline for the disappearance of Donna Lass is, maybe you've been seeing the graphic of the missing persons poster that's been going around throughout this episode, and that relates to, well, I guess the long story short is, Howard Davis obtained the missing persons poster from someone's family, from someone in Donna Lass's family, and then he provided it to Tom Voigt, and that went on the internet. But there is a set of lines there that is written in the style of the Zodiac ciphers, but it is a simple substitution cipher revealing, "Beware, I'm stalking you, Donna Lass." Possibly, but that seems like a very simple and basic solution. Now it's like Nick Pelling for his analysis of those two lines. And another important point about that is that it wasn't actually created by the Zodiac Killer. It appears, and almost certainly was created by one of Donna Lass's family members as a way to draw attention to the case, and that states that she disappeared on September 6th, 1970, which would mean that she was working the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift on September 5th, going into September 6th, and would have disappeared sometime after 1:40 a.m. on September 6th. While I was listening to Morph interview Joanne Getchy, I thought it was just really quite baffling that there were so many things in the police reports that just she either didn't remember or she just thought that they were simply inaccuracies. And I tend to think it's the latter, that there were just inaccurate statements or misrepresentations. Mike Morford was even asking her, it says in the police report that you talked to a tall security guard for an extended period of time and you had an extended conversation with him. And she's like, I absolutely do not recall anything about that. And I know it was 50 years ago, but you'd think if her friend had gone missing and she would have talked to somebody for an extended period of time, then those are the types of things that you would not forget, because the brain is trying so hard to focus and to remember and to comprehend everything that was going on. But in terms of who actually abducted Donna Lass and where did she end up, Donna Lass was reported to have dated a few guys, but Joanne Getchy says that she actually didn't date very much, and Donna Lass had at least one person who could possibly fit the description of a boyfriend, and some people think that that's just the answer to this mystery, that she was abducted by either an ex or current boyfriend. But some things that Joanne Getchy was talking about in the interview were related to just possible predators, that it wasn't the Zodiac Killer. Instead, Donna Lass may have been abducted by someone who worked for the Sahara Tahoe, and he wanted to get with her, and she did not want to be with him, and it was heterosexual animosity, or just someone who couldn't handle rejection, so they did something terrible to Donna Lass. And throughout the Donna Lass series that I did last year, I heavily explored the possibility from a mental standpoint of, could somebody have murdered Donna Lass in the Sahara Tahoe, in a place that was like a dead spot, where there wouldn't have been surveillance, and thinking about people like a maintenance man or a custodian or a security guard, someone who could possibly have that type of knowledge where they know that a certain place isn't going to be disturbed, luring Donna, who is practically alone at 1:40 in the morning, or even if it's at a different time of the night, but to the secluded area, and did something horrible to her. Another point, though, that was shared in the interview by Mike Morford with Joanne Getchy, I should say, is that it took nearly a week for the Sahara Tahoe to reach out to Donna Lass's family, because firstly, there is a prank phone call, more or less, where someone states that Donna Lass has a family emergency, and then they contacted, I believe it was her sister, and they just asked, will Donna Lass be returning to work at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, and they knew of no such family emergency. So then that's what really tipped off the authorities. And I said very clearly during the Donna Lass series that Mike Morford and I disagree on a lot about the Zodiac Killer case, but he talked about how that phone call, and there's actually more than one phone call that was made, the phone calls that were made after the disappearance of Donna Lass could have been used to buy time, and now I completely comprehend why he would say that. It's not just someone who is doing a nasty prank, or it's not even the concept of the Zodiac killer's taunting phone calls, where the Zodiac is like, I'm the one who did it. No, it's more like someone is trying to buy time, maybe to destroy evidence, maybe to get their story straight because they believe that they're going to be interviewed or the police are going to be looking at them. So that would mean that Donna Lass would have had some type of connection to her attacker. And I believe Mike Morford sent this in an email stating that the thing he was really wanting to zero in on was, did Donna Lass know her attacker? And did the attacker know Donna Lass? And it could very possibly be both. And as we said, if this is somebody who felt like some type of rejected lover from the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, that would answer a lot of questions. Or at the very least, it creates a hot zone where people could investigate and then they could narrow it down, as opposed to just some stranger, some random passerby. But I think the interview that Joanne Getchy did with Mike Morford really shared a lot of characteristics about Donna Lass that we don't get to hear about too frequently. And that is that Donna Lass was somewhat of a perfectionist, not only with her dressing and her appearance, but also with her apartment and where she lived. Although I think it's very odd that after Donna Lass went missing, they went back to her apartment and they found that a light was on in one of the rooms. I want to say it was the bathroom light, but don't quote me on that. And there was a new apartment. She wouldn't have been super familiar with it. I can't fault her for that. But just hearing this about how Donna really tried to take care of her appearance, and as Joanne openly said, she was a perfectionist, and also that she didn't date a lot. So that leads me to think that there could have been someone who really was bothered by that even, and it just goes to show you that Donna Lass was an ordinary person. Okay, maybe she liked gambling, nothing wrong with that. And just a final detail about that though, like about how Donna Lass would get off work and she would gamble until it was daylight out and then walk home. So Joanne Getchy also said that because she worked at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, they frequently put on performances and they had shows that they would let people watch, and Donna Lass would also go to see those during the time after she had finished work and before sunrise. Now in the summertime, sunrise would be very early, so I think that that doesn't bother me too much. But again, I still have to go with the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. timeline, and that Donna would have been getting off work around 2 a.m., completing her shift, and maybe at 1:45 a.m. is when the disappearance occurred. And I do believe that she was abducted. I do believe that she was murdered. I cannot prove that in a court of law, but that is what I am definitely leaning toward. I do not believe in a Zodiac killer connection. Instead, I think that that is simply people have connected some dots in a way that I feel is inappropriate, but I'm always open to correction on all of that. And I think it's just so valuable to hear the first-hand stories of people who knew the victims. And with the Donna Lass case, there really is not a lot of info that is out online compared to the other cases that we've talked about in the Zodiac Killer mystery, as well as in the true crime world. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and as always, you can like, subscribe, follow along with AstroPsych 400, as well as this channel, Black Box Online Radio. Anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always Instagram, BlackBoxNet88. And I will see you over there on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.